Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience.
Thanks everyone for joining another cloud podcast. Today we have Alex, my co-host. Alex, welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure, Artie. Great to be here.
Of course. And we've got our guest speaker today, Bryan Plaster. Bryan, you're from Complete CSM. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about Complete CSM.
Awesome. I'd love to do it. So welcome everybody. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast. I'm real excited to be here. And what we do is add AI extensions to customer success. Like if you've ever looked at customer success intelligence, it's like, okay, how do you make each CSM better, give them digital superpowers? How do you enhance and augment their power across every stage of the customer journey?
And when you talk about AI, I know that's like a touchy subject for our audience. Are we talking about automation? Are we talking about something that's listening to everything that's happening and giving them some suggestions? Tell us a little bit about artificial intelligence or what you guys do in the background that can make a CSM a super CSM.
That's a super loaded question. I love it. So let me give you a little more background. So I've been in customer success, I guess, 13 years. I was one of the first people that used Gainsight. I was customer number 5. And I found these guys because I wanted to answer that ultimate question, NPS surveys, Net Promoter Score. I wanted to answer that ultimate question and get our customers to give us feedback on us. Right. So I started down that path. I found Gainsight. They were called Jabara. They were this little company, like 10 people, about the size of us. And they had a solution that I needed. Right. And so I got involved in customer success. And Gainsight's since grown to be a $1 billion unicorn, which is great. And they've brought me along the way. Like I've spoke at every Pulse conference and every customer conference they had. Just a great partner. So we started off with, okay, customer success needs technology, right? Because you're trying to make sure that customers are successful, trying to make sure they adopt. But unfortunately, people don't give you, the CFOs don't ever give you the right ratios, right? Okay, you got 100 accounts. It's your responsibility to make them all successful. Okay, how do I do that? I'm going to call everybody, right? And so I've always looked at technology to help, like the Net Promoter Score and different pieces. And so we look at Gainsight as a platform. There's a lot of other really strong platforms out there too. There's Smart Carrot and Turn Zero. Customer success has really evolved, right? It's the next level. And so what we set out to do is not rebuild a platform. We set out to be extensions to the existing platform by adding AI. So hence your question is, we thought a lot about that. Do we just rebuild, a customer success platform, or do we go and we do something really cool with it, right? And really give those CSMs digital superpowers. So that's what we set out to do. It's every single interaction that, the CSM, the support, whoever, on your team, every interaction that they have with the customer, that should lead to the next best action. Right. And it's hard to do because you have this full team of people, right? You have to go ask them, hey, how did the meeting go? What was going on? Tell me more. And then let's make a game plan. Let's have another meeting ourselves to make a game plan with the customer. Like every interaction should lead to the next best action. And you should use things like leading indicators of sentiment to really drive that next conversation. Right. So once you have an action plan with the customer, now you got to start looking at, okay, well, how do they feel about us the last 10 times that we talked to them? Are they getting more and more excited to work with us, or do they not like us? Right? It's kind of this way that you can subjectively talk about that stuff, but what if you could use the data from all the interactions and conversations to tell you more about that customer, right? And then I guess the third piece, you're asking about AI. That was my long-winded answer to your question. So the third piece of AI is, we have this digital EQ coach. So it's all about emotional intelligence. So you use what happened in the interactions and conversations with your customer from all the people, and you go back and you can coach them and train them. Hey, don't do this, or do this more, or have more enthusiasm, or be a little bit more confident, or try to be careful. Don't tell so many stories. because it just made the customer upset, like they shut down. So that digital EQ coach kind of brings it back to, okay, well, how do we take the team from really good to great using technology? And that's what we do.
I really love that. And we just posted a podcast yesterday about AI and just how good it is, but also how bad it can be at the same time, because there's this balance between, well, how much data can we capture from consumers or from other businesses, and what's fair, what's ethical and things like that. But what I'd like to ask is, what was the process of, when you guys started to developing that platform, and what did that look like for you guys to get it to a point where, like, okay, this is valuable, this is going to be great for our clients to add this as a widget to their CSM?
That's a great question, Alex. So I love to tell the beginnings, right? Like my co-founder and I said, hey, let's do customer success and AI. And our question was, what does that mean? Right? What would actually help people? Right? And so myself being a practitioner for the last 15 years, I thought, well, there's a lot of little plugins and little things that I could do right now. I can add a little plugin to a Zoom conversation, right? I can add a little inbox piece to Gmail to give me some insights on my emails. There's a lot of these little things that you can do are starting to pop up in AI, but really none of them are looking at the long tail, the history with each client, right? They're not looking at the history of, hey, I had these 10 interactions with this person. Are they slowly getting more loyal? Or is it like a box of knives to them and they're getting more and more upset, right? So these tools that just plug into one conversation are nice and they're exciting, but they don't really give you what you need to be able to work with those people, right? And so we look at our AI as, we're not trying to be Big Brother. We're trying to look at, okay, tell me more about this person, how to follow up with this person, how to work with them. What are some observations about how we can work together better, right? We actually have something called a SWOT analysis. It's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is, hey, what are some opportunities to work with this person? And so then you can work on, okay, well, how can we partner better together based on their personality profile? And the thing that really kind of set this in motion was a pandemic, honestly. When the pandemic hit, everybody was grounded. No one was traveling anymore, including me, right? I'm like a Marriott lifetime titanium elite. Actually, like I'm like the full Marriott person because I traveled so much. But when the pandemic hit, no one traveled. So how do you continue to communicate with your customers? Well, everyone's doing Zoom.
Yeah.
Right. So Gong.io took off. You saw that. So I was looking at Gong. I'm like, it's pretty simple what they do. They record conversation. They let people add notes to them and they play them back. Right. And so people were doing 6 conversations a day, and then they were rewatching them for the next 2 hours, right? Trying to, take notes and figure out what happened. And so, part of our kind of plan was, okay, this is something that is taken off. Everyone's doing things a different way. Gong's more for sales teams. It's a little bit different thing that people are thinking about. They're accepting it. So let's hook into Zoom, right? There's 300 million users on Zoom. You just like you did, you can record the Zoom conversation. It asks people if they want to be recorded or not. People have been for years being recorded, right? They're like, hey, we're going to record this for training purposes or whatever. So people are getting super used to that. And so people are open to recording. We actually we also have an AI insights on the meeting. So we have an email that we can send out to people. Hey, if you record it, I'll give you insights on somehow we could work together, right? So we're trying to make it easier for people to work together, kind of demystify the AI piece, and just make it so it's not Big Brother. It's, hey, we can all get along better, right? If there's some kind of a tense situation, this person responds well to laughter, whereas this other person responds well to resolving that issue right then. Right. So when you look at AI, you're right. There's over the last couple of years, there's been a kind of mystique about it. That's why all these different applications have these very kind of targeted, okay, well, we're going to look through an email and give you one insight, or we're going to write this for you. Right. And so it's slowly getting accepted, and the pandemic just put it into high gear. They're like, hey, we're being recorded anyway. Let's use it to work together better. right? That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I like how you guys are focused on more than just one conversation or one data set or data point. You guys are focused on the overall interaction between the customer and the company, and using those as indicators, not only the actual interaction itself, so the conversation information or detail, but also the subjective and objective data around it, like what was actually said, what was the sentiment, to drive potential outcomes, like this person potentially might be good for upsell or cross sell, or maybe they're trending towards wanting to cancel or leave. So do kind of a touch base with them to make sure that they're still happy. So how tell us a little bit about how you guys orchestrate the next step, or because every organization, every CSM team is slightly different. Is it something where there's like some knobs and check boxes for them to configure to make it easy, or do you guys help with that? How does that work, orchestrating the next step?
Well, so some of that's our secret sauce, but I think the foundational piece of it is you need to grab every digital interaction, like every Zoom recording, every email, every support ticket, every web chat, every survey, right? The more information, the better for sophisticated AI to really work.
Mm-hmm.
You need a lot of information to be able to work through it. And so how do we roll that up? Well, we break it into, we have an AI pipeline that looks at sentiment, right? Regular sentiment, but it looks at emotional pieces, right? It starts looking at objective behavior, like, how long did you wait before you answered that question? How many questions are asked versus statements? How many action items from the call? Did you smile? It's facial expressions. Were you delivering an enthusiastic piece but frowning? I don't know. Let's take a look. What was your commitment to the conversation? Right? How motivated were you to continue on with that conversation or continue to do the things that we talked about? Right. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of information in a conversation, and truth be told, we use a lot of AI pieces. We use Amazon Comprehend, right? We use Google AI, right? We use Theranos AI, right? I mean, we use a lot of really powerful AI technologies, and a lot of our value prop is we consolidate them together by person. Then we consolidate those by account, right? We're in customer success. And then the prediction piece is, okay, well, how do you get there? Now you have loyalty of the account. We project it out into the future. So we use something called a polynomial regression to project out a line in the next 18 weeks. And then it gets into line math. We look at the slope of the line. I'm probably telling you too much already, but how much is it trending up or down, or is it flat? And then you compare that to other metrics like adoption, right? So if you have, for example, the loyalty of a customer is going down, but adoption's going up, that tells you something. That tells you that, hey, they don't like us as much overall, but they're using our product more. They're probably migrating off our platform, right? And then that's the things that I've seen from my experience in customer success. And so we have 10 different scenarios where, like, how far out do the lines cross? What are the thresholds of hitting top or bottom? And so the predictions aren't just rules. That's one of the things that I like Gong. I like what they stand for. We're the Gong for customer success, right? We build AI models that then learn from the different meetings, right? And then the trend predictions are from those models in those meetings, right? So it's a pretty simple setup. You build a model of the process, the way the customer journey is supposed to go. That's the way you build the models.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everyone has the ideal land, adopt, expand, renew. Everyone has the ideal, state. And so we capture that, what's supposed to happen. And then we actually apply it to the real conversations and interactions, and see how you did, right? How are we doing? And then what's our feedback loop to teach the CSMs? Okay, well, how do you do better? Don't say these words or say these words, or don't tell a lot of stories in an escalation, and keep your enthusiasm down because the customer's super upset, right? These are all the human first factors that we trigger in these models. So it's just basically what you were doing anyway. using EQ and AI, and then applying that to how did it go, right? And then you start getting more and more insights on your CSM and also your customer.
So it's interesting because it sounds like there's a lot of pre-work that needs to probably be done by the client to make sure they have a framework around what CSM is to them or what customer success is before they can just jump in and throw AI at it, right? It's only as good as what you build it to be. And I think one of our guests even before said you have to treat AI like an employee, right? If you don't nurture it and grow it and teach it, it's going to go off on some different direction, and you have to look at it like an extra employee. How do you get a client started from zero? Say, hey, I love this AI idea. It sounds great. Do you ever, what does that look like?
So that's a great observation, and you have to train AI, right? In all the movies, it's like AI starts as a kid, and then slowly grows and learns, right? And so I started messing with AI. I used the Microsoft AI. I guess it's been about 6 years ago, building chatbots. Like, how do you listen to what people are typing in, interpret it, right? And then give back a regular response. And the training took a long time, right? And the way that you trained it was you would have to train it by what you think should happen, and then you train it by what actually happens with the customer, right? And then it slowly gets better. But the problem is, if you're just starting out, it's not very good up front, right? So that's what a lot of people say. So what we've done at Complete CSM to try to mitigate that was we have the digital twins or digital archetypes of each type of meeting and every stage of the customer journey. So we've gotten with our advisors, and I've gotten with quite a few customer success leaders. Like I'm pretty connected in the space. I know a lot of people. We get together and everyone gives their input on what a model should look like. So an onboarding model, right, is be super enthusiastic, right? You want to have this logical structure of what you're trying to accomplish, because like in onboarding, you're trying to set go live dates, right? You're trying to make sure they have their team trained, make sure they're enlisted with support. Like if you think about onboarding, it's pretty standard what people do. So we provide this existing built-in model that starts you off on the right path. And then what I've seen our customers do is they say, okay, well, let me pull up my playbook for onboarding. Let me tweak this, change that. Let me add a few more moments or words. And then you have a starting point that's actually pretty accurate. It's what you're already doing. So it's not building it from scratch. It's using best practice models that you're probably already using, and then tweaking them for your organization. So we have that, executive business review. What happens there? Tell a lot of stories about how successful you are, right? I mean, there's all these different pieces that you put into the model. So we have those built in. And so the retraining aspect isn't really huge. But we on the models, let's say, we actually focus that effort on, okay, we have the model. Now we've talked to customers and we've processed those interactions and we've gotten insights from it. Now let's go back and let's coach the CSM, right? So that way the CSM can change their behavior. Like, at the simplest form, it's like, don't use these words because these are allergic reactions to people. And at the more complex, it's like, if you're in an escalation, don't be so enthusiastic, because your enthusiasm was through the roof and the customer knew it, right? And their commitment level started to drop. So that becomes this coaching back to the CSM, who can then practice a session against the model and tweak it if they need to, or the manager can tweak it, and then go through the whole cycle again. Right now, you're getting more insights on customers. You're learning as a CSM team. You're growing. It's just taking everything from good to great is the way I like to look at it. It's like how do you go from a really good team to a great team? It's a very specific process to get there. It's not just going to happen because everyone likes each other. It's going to be like, okay, well, what do we need to do to get from good to great? And that's what Complete CSM does, down to the EQ of delivery and delivery of meetings.
Yeah, I used to run a team, and we were in. There were some collections, but also some cancellation and save attempts. Yeah. And oftentimes, I would overhear, just because this is before there was AI and the ability to really record in a meaningful way. I would just walk the floor, and I would hear the words "sorry" a lot. And sorry is a good term to use, emotional intelligence wise. It's good to be empathetic and apologize for things, but it's not good to be using that every 10 minutes or every,
Mm.
third call. Because at that point in time, it just turns into you're just apologizing for letting the customer down, instead of actually just understanding what their needs are and then fixing their needs. Because the person who's calling in may not really want to hear sorry, that you let me down. They know that you've heard the feedback. They just want some sort of solution and answer. But shifting gears a little bit, I had a question around, and you said something earlier that was really, really insightful, because we had a couple other people on the podcast earlier who oversee these customer success teams, customer experience teams, and for software as a service tools. And they like to use their internal metrics of adoption or usage as a positive. But you said something that was very interesting that I don't think a lot of people, and this might be insightful for the people listening to this podcast, sometimes usage could actually be an indicator of potential churn, or someone who, has bought another product. So they're getting all of their information out of your product by going in and manually taking things out. Or maybe your product's too hard to use, so it's 10 clicks instead of 2. So they're in there and they're using it to its fullest because they have to, and they're handcuffed by having to go through all those steps. So tell us a little bit about how you adopt and change to all of your different customers, because some customers, adoption can be an indicator of upsell, and some could be an indicator of churn. Some is more of like a neutral metric that doesn't really play into anything. So how do you work with them? How do you adjust that secret sauce so that it's catered to the individual person?
I love the question. I mean, that's something that everyone thinks is completely custom, right? It's like I have to make my own churn model because no one else is the same, right? And I've always said the same thing. I've run customer success teams at Talon, at Informatica, at PTC. I go in thinking, okay, whatever you're doing is wrong. We're going to go fix it all, which is, of course, a very poor change management attitude. I've learned from those. But you're looking at, okay, well, how does the business work? If the adoption's going down, but they seem like they're loyal and they're going to renew, what exactly does that mean? Like in that case, a lot of times it means, well, the champion's loyal to you, but the users are not, right? So every one of these scenarios, they're common, but they're also different. So what we do at Complete CSM is we let our customers configure the thresholds. Like it's like, okay, well, this scenario only works if the renewal's 6 months or more out, right? It's like how fast is adoption going down? Is it a slope of -1, 2, or 3? Right? So you have all these metrics, and a lot of people, they don't care about that. They're like, hey, just give me the base model and let's go for it. But we have those indicators that you can change and tweak to really let you understand your business. And the way it came up with it, like we're working with Talon right now on a churn modeling. And so I sat down with the VP of customer success and I gave him these 10 scenarios. All right, so based on the conversational loyalty and based on adoption and based on the CSM health, if it looks like this, what does that mean to you, right? And a lot of them he confirmed. I think a couple of them he kind of changed his mind a little bit. He's like, well, actually, only if it's like way out in the future. Like, that's the discussions that you have, and so that's the configurable thing in Complete CSM. And it's pretty new technology, but I mean, I've made so many churn modelers, right, in spreadsheets, and I've come up with so many if then else statements and so many. Okay, well, it's this. The churn is lack of adoption, but it's because maybe they didn't like their account manager, or maybe it's because they didn't get the feature that they asked for, right? And so you get these super deep levels of rules and triggers, right? And those, after a year, you can imagine, always reinventing, and those things get huge. And then all of a sudden you have to start over. So that's why we really boiled it up into line math. Because if you can project the way things are going, it's like a trending fatigue, or a trending they're more excited. You look at this time series data. I guess you're getting me super excited already, right? Like, I went to a couple of conferences last year with Snowflake and Data Robot. You guys heard of those guys before? Yep. And Data Robot is one of the first kind of mass market AI systems. there's some really neat technologies out there and platforms, like Databricks is another one, right? And so when you look at these platforms, they let you go hire a data scientist and do all this yourself, right? And of course, it's 2-year projects and it's 20 people. But I saw a few things that I thought were really powerful, and we use some of those same techniques. Like when you look at a time series, it's not 2 years worth of data; it's a window. So let me define, the time series is moving window of data. Let me look at how things interact in that window, to then look at how the next window is probably going to be. And so we started looking at all these different pieces, and you really dive into, the AI as this big umbrella, but then you get into NLP to understanding and kind of pulling the data out, structuring it. You get into NLU about suggestions. Then you get into predictions. But it's hard to predict things based on rules. You want to predict things based on trends. And so that's what we did, is we took it to really, we feel like a whole nother level. If you just have a bunch of rule system, there's going to be some problems. You'll never get it right. You'll always be tweaking it. But if you look at things, the way things are trending over time, then you can really put together, what's the slope of the trend? How far till the lines interact, right? When do they hit upper and lower limits, right? You start looking at these things, you get deep insights. And when you pair that with, myself, my team, and all the VPs and of customer success that I've talked to, right, you start to get consistency that, hey, this always looks like this, right? And so it's not so much a prediction that you don't trust. It's like, this happened 10 other times, it's going to happen again, right? And so you start getting confidence in what you have. And then you can tweak it if you want, but I mean, when you try to simplify things to make them more powerful, that really works in my book.
Yeah, imagine.
I totally agree with that. That's a huge area where we're moving in the future. Go ahead, Alex. I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, like, you talk about data scientists and you talk about, your VPs of customer success that you talk to, and it seems like it was as much AI as you add, you still need people with experience. You need people that know what they're doing and that have been around data, that have been around the industry, to be able to interpret the trends and interpret and know what questions to ask. Because a lot of people just think AI is you plop it in and it goes, but it really takes a smart mind to get the most out of it.
Yeah, it's SME. So you're totally spot on, Alex. Like I spent a lot of my days in, running development teams and product companies, and the more removed you are from the SME, the harder it is and the longer it takes to build things. That, like, you have to make requirements, and then you have to go through a product person that doesn't know the business, but they know the product. Then you have to give it to developers, right? So if you think about all these different levels of being removed, it makes things super complicated, right? You got to iterate over and over and over again. And that's when you train AI, that's, if there's a long tail, you have to sit there and you have to train it by adding a bunch of rules and keep getting feedback. It's this big loop, which you have to do. But how do you accelerate that loop? Right? Well, you get experts to sit there and say, okay, well, this is my scenario. And then they apply the limits into their scenario, and then they validate if it's right or not. And then you can learn from that. So I'm with you. It's kind of fun, neat stuff. And I have so many war stories about these things that happened. Just like, why would a green customer churn? Well, because they were migrating off our product, and we were like so excited that the adoption was there, and they're almost at full capacity. We're going to go sell them double because we're so excited. But in actuality, they're actually moving off your product. They're not talking to you, right? And so if you just look at one metric, like Artie was saying, man, these guys' usage is through the roof, but we can't get a hold of them. Well, that probably means something, right? That means that they're probably, migrating off your platform or getting as much out of it as they can.
Yeah.
I was talking to actually a VP of customer success, like right before we talked today, and he was saying they have this data science project around kind of clinical trials and medical research. Real interesting company, and we're talking about partnering together. But one of the things he told me is, sometimes our usage goes through the roof because they're getting all the research they can, before they move off our platform. And so now they look for that. But you need the AI to look for that for you.
Yeah.
based on that model. So that's those are things that everyone sees, but I think you want to be able to quantify those, and that's what we really help with.
Yeah, you talked a lot about predicting the next step, or having the AI put everything into a data lake like a snowflake, and then have the AI actually tell you what the next step should be. It's going to be the customer's going to call in 3 days, or renew, or they're going to go dark on you. You should probably reach out. That next thing. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but there's a big difference between having a very flat decision tree, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, across just a couple of dimensions, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, versus actually feeding all of it into one, and then having it generate some sort of outcome or next step, as opposed to it going down a predetermined path for a call flow. I know in the conversational AI space, things like chatbots and voice bots, we're growing out of this NLP, which is natural language processing, which is understanding what the person is asking and then pushing them down a decision tree, go left or go right, into this NLG, which is natural language generation, which is understanding what they say and then curating a response from verbs and nouns and sentence structure. So there is no path. It's an unknown, like literally they're going down this, the time is being written in real time as you're interacting with it. So what is your guys' strategy with your AI? Is it a little bit of both? Is it more of a decision tree where you have a company organized, this is the life cycle and this is where things should flow over time? Or are you trying to take that information, process it, and then return some sort of generation of the next step in the relationship between them and their customer?
That's a very good question, because a lot of people are using an AI term, and everyone's trying to figure out what it means, right? I totally get that, and so you hit on the key point. You have natural language processing, NLP, which is how do you take all that data and structure it somehow. Then you get into natural language understanding, which is, okay, well, now let's start looking at the timing, the word choices. How subjective is the word, right? What's the polarity, right? How long did they wait before they answered a question? Or what was the pace of the piece, right? So you get into this understanding to really understand not only what they said, but what they meant, right? And that's how you start getting to the next level. Then you get into natural language generation, which is, we do that pretty straightforward in our application. It's, how do you follow up with this person, right? It's how do you work with them, right? And it's insights, it's that SWOT analysis about them. Like, hey, here's some strengths about the person, right? And it's not telling you exactly what to do, but it's telling you how to work with that person. We call them leading indicators of sentiment. Like, how do you work with these people to really make it a better experience for everybody, right? And then you tie all that up, right? That's where we got into the term modeler. Then you tie up each person's insights into the company insights, and then you can start looking at, okay, well, for all the people of the company, here's the way things are trending up or down.
Yeah.
So it's really it builds on itself. Like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, there's a lot of really cool AI technology, and we're using the best ones we could find, right? And even built some of our own. But the key is they're all independent individuals. So when you start rolling them up, and you start getting insights on people from the multiple interactions that everyone at your company's had with them, and then the people at that company, that's where you get, just a magnitude, exponential insights and help. So now you can actually start trusting the system to, okay, well, what's the next step we should take, right? And it's just, okay, well, they call it next best action. You guys you probably heard that term before. That's a pretty neat thing that Telcom kind of pushed. But it's like, hey, what's the next thing we do? Because in customer success, you have this journey that you're taking. You have journey stages. You're taking customers down this path of, hey, this is the best outcome for customers. Like, a lot of times it's adopt and then expand, and then there's renew, and you do different things in them. So as a CSM or a CSM team, and I've fallen into this trap before, it's real easy to just follow that path no matter what's going on, all right, hey, we got to get you to the next phase, right? We got to get this. We got to have an EBR this date, right? We got to do this thing. And so when you look at not only the path that you want to be on, but what are some of the variants that the customer's on taking on that path? That's where you really get some insights, and you can adjust. Maybe the path that you defined 2 years ago isn't the same path, right? And you need to tweak that. You need to get that feedback loop to let's update our journey for the customer, and let's also teach the team to trigger these right kind of EQ moments, right? To say the right words that people respond to in the industry, right? To do the right things in each meeting, like have the high level of confidence in one type of meeting, and maybe keep your enthusiasm kind of at bay in a different kind of meeting, right? So when you look at all these different factors, it's not only the insights you generate, but it's the feedback loop back to the team to go from good to great. That's what I've always strived for as a running customer success teams. Is we always got great people. We're always working together. We're always teaming to figure it out. Like I've never been on a bad team, but how do you get them to great? Right. That's some kind of big pivotal thing that really requires a lot of data. Right. You can have great CSMs, but for the whole team to bring up, that's something that you can really only do with technology and by leveraging all the data, all the conversations that are being had by everybody.
Yeah, and that's really the goal, right? Because you can use it to scale, right? You always have your unicorn salesperson, a unicorn CSM that's just naturally great at something, or they just have that knack. But it's like, how do you take that and learn from it for everybody else? And that's where the AI is doing that for them, right? And you can see where it's all going.
Yeah, I used to call it, maybe I still do, the digital imprint. You take the digital imprint of your best CSM in each area, and then you replicate it to the team, right? So it's not quite that simple. I mean, that would be cool. But you understand, okay, how do they deliver this meeting? And then you bring it back to the team. Okay, well, you should do these same things too. And it's not just what you say, but it's down to that EQ, the ways that you act, the ways that you deliver.
And that's what I think the brilliance that Gong had done on the sales side that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That was their whole goal. Is like, how can you take those learning moments, teaching moments for the good people, or what they're doing well or what they're not doing well, and making it teachable.
Yeah, and they've done that real well. I love Gong. I like to say we're the Gong for customer success.
Yeah.
Right. And, because with the sales situation, you have the BDRs and you have the pre-sales pieces. You're trying to prepare and say the right things in meetings, and then you get the sale. Most sales teams move on, right? With customers, you have 3, 6, 9, a year, 2 years of data, right? If you captured it all to really understand what's going on with the customer and how can you make it a better experience for them, where everyone can win, right? Win-win scenarios.
So I suppose if someone doesn't have a solution like yours now, or they're not quite ready for it, what would the suggestion be? My thought is, well, start recording everything, start getting like a database of data so that when you are ready, you can have a year's worth, or call it 2 years worth, that you can dump into the machine to get a head start. Is that something that you'd recommend, or how do you see that for companies that want it but aren't quite ready for it?
I would absolutely recommend exactly that. Is you've already been recording your meetings in the pandemic, and then you got to take time to go rewatch them to figure out things.
Yeah.
But keep doing that. Start recording pieces. We actually have on the Zoom marketplace, you can find Complete CSM, where you can just go install the Zoom plugin. It's called Zoom for Complete CSM. And then every one of your meetings that you record, we get insights that you can access on that meeting. We also have, we had the same challenge with another customer. They're like, okay, I've been recording all year, but I'm starting now. So another thing we did was we have an import process where we can import, if they're still at Zoom, we can import all your meetings from as long back as you have them. We've done that for a few customers. That's worked out well. And then all of a sudden you have 6 months of data and you're like, all right, let's go make this thing happen. And so that's pretty exciting as well. But yeah, we're still a new company. We're a startup, but we're just going by the things that just like you have experience in these areas. Our customers ask for stuff, and we're like, all right, that makes sense. Let's knock that out. Let's do that. So I would say that's the way to get started. Start recording everything. Then you can add on support tickets You already have web chats. I mean, it's amazing. You're probably already sending surveys out, right? Like NPS surveys. I mean, it's amazing what you're already doing. It's just all siloed and it's probably just being ignored. So keep doing what you're doing, do more of it. And then Complete CSM brings it all together. And that's the way we look at it. But I wanted to take a second to look at this beer collection on the top of we talked about that before. I love this. Like how many different do you have beer from? Because this is super interesting, all these different taps.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, everyone went to work from home, and we all realized that our Zoom backgrounds, the physical ones, not the virtual ones, they're a representation of like who we are and what we do, what we our hobbies are. So I decided to put Stormtrooper in business attire because I'm a little bit nerdy, but a little bit business. And then my passion of beer, and back in the college days, it would be a bottle of beer that you put up on a shelf, but those get all moldy and gross. And, those were like $1 each. So I decided to step up my game and do beer taps. I would say there's about 40 of them up there. There's another shoebox of about 10 more that I have hidden away. And there's some ones that were gifted to me. There's some that I bought. There's some that were accidentally taken from some bars or borrowed from some bars at some point, but each one has its own story, and I try to get one that's unique. But what about you guys? I know, Bryan, we're running up on time, but tell us a little bit about your background. I know we had a pre-call and you talked about woodworking, so tell us a little bit about your wall back there.
Yeah. So your background is a little bit of you after this pandemic. And I think we're not out of the woods yet, but we're almost there. So, I love the woodwork. So I built the wall here and stained it. It's all red oak. It's not the fancy mahogany, but it's all red oak stuff I could get at Lowe's and Home Depot. And put the trim. I have a record player, some records. I have a tube amp over here. So I'm real into music and vintage equipment. I have, see if we can see this. My little town. So I'm out of Texas. There's a lot of little Texas towns that have like the post office, the courthouse, all those little pieces.
Yeah.
So my dad gave me that. That's the way a lot of cities look. They're all a town square. So I like to keep to my roots, but it's all kind of a wood color. So that's where I'm at. I mean, on the other side of my office, I have a port wine collection. So I went to Porto in Portugal, and I heard the whole story. That's probably a whole other podcast. I heard the whole story about port wine, about how it's grapes that only grow in Porto. They burn up in the summer and then they freeze in the winter, but that makes them port. And then they put them in barrels, ship them down the river, and then they pull them out and they add a bunch of brandy and stuff to it, right? And they distill it. But when you're in Porto, you're looking across the river because one side's restaurants, the other side's all these wineries, basically. And you see Sandemans and you see all these different kind of port companies over there. And I just kind of fell in love with the concept. So whenever I see a bottle of port wine, I buy it.
That's awesome.
Well, I have a kind of a stack like you do as well.
That's great. I love it. No, my background is pretty boring right now. It used to be more exciting with the mountain backdrop and a surfboard, but I still got to get it. I'm still moving into the new place. So I'll have to step up my game here for the next call.
you got
Alex.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to play us some music at some point in time.
Oh, no way. Yeah, I haven't played for like a month, but I should. I'll serenade you guys. But Bryan, I tell you, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I just love the AI conversation, and I love just where it's going and what good companies are doing with it and how it's helping businesses and consumers. And ultimately, I think you guys are on a great path, and I appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your love and interest. That's why I wanted to do this with you guys. Because it's all about new technology and how we leverage it for like real business outcomes.
Absolutely.
And we're super excited about just being part of Bleeding Edge and getting our story out. Because we're a new company, but we're having lots of fun. So we'll keep that going.
Awesome.
Sounds great. Thanks everyone for the podcast, and join us next time on the next episode. Thanks, Alex, for hosting.
Yep. Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.